Hello, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, according to where you are watching us now live. It's really great to have here another episode of Talk to Your Meeting Daughters, right, Martin?
Yeah, great to be here. It's just been a month. We're back on path or on track now for our roughly our monthly our monthly chat at the fireside to see how things are shaping up.
That's
Good to be
that's
here.
awesome. That's awesome. And as our viewers can watch us, we are doing this as much as informal we can. It's like a Zoom call where everybody can watch us. That's the spirit here, and I hope you like the show today. We have two guests that are really, it's really a pleasure for me to have them here. They are the leading evangelists on two of the leading companies on online visual collaboration. This is a segment of the industry, which you call it software industry, that was probably unknown 4 years ago. 2 years ago, everybody started to use a little bit of visual collaboration, but everybody's saying, oh, I prefer to use post-it notes in my office. But suddenly the pandemic struck, and I'm sure that Jim and Chipra, they will be able to introduce themselves and explain the explosion on the usage of both these tools. And I'm talking of Mural and Miro or Miro. Chipra, it's Miro, right?
Miro.
Miro.
Hero. Yeah.
Yeah. And over to you, Martin, and let's start the program.
Yeah, it's Shibra, lovely to meet you, and Jim, you're very welcome. It's a real pleasure, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us. I suppose to kick off, the first thing that strikes me just listening to Paul's introduction there, are we pre-COVID? Are we still in COVID, or are we post-COVID for digital and visual collaborations from either of your perspectives? Where are we at in the last 2 year cycle, which has been really interesting, hasn't it?
Yeah, and please, before you start answering these, I would like you, each of you, to share something about yourselves you never, not usually share with someone else, right? Think about
Whoa.
something, and it could be
No
alphabetical
pressure, guys.
order or ladies first. Ladies first, Shipra.
There you
Oh my gosh. All right. So I don't know if everyone knows. My name is Shipra Khayan. I'm a UX designer, design leader, built and led teams, launched a lot of products, and now I'm an evangelist at Miro. Uh, is something that personal that I don't share with a lot of people. I have a garden that I spend an inordinate amount of time in. So I grow like passion fruit in San Francisco. I'm obsessed.
Lovely.
I am obsessed. I read books on botany, probably more books on botany than books on facilitation. So that's
Super.
my weird thing. I'll pass it on to you, Jim.
Yeah, hey everybody. Jim Caldback, Chief Evangelist at Miro. Also spent a lot of time in my career in design teams and innovation teams, and moved over to Miro about 7 years ago. Looked after our customer success and support team, so I was a little bit more go-to-market facing than I had been previously in my career. But let's see. I was going to say that I like to cook quite a bit. Nothing necessarily fancy, but in my house, I'm kind of the one that's responsible for dinner and stuff like that. And I make some mean pancakes, and I just made beef bourguignon for dinner the other night for some guests, and they thought it was fantastic. So yeah.
Wow.
So Shipra can grow it and you can cook it, huh?
There you go. Right now, there's a supply chain there, a whole vertical supply chain.
Paul, we're going to dine fine tonight.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's the only thing we cannot still share virtually, right? We cannot
Yeah.
share a cup of coffee here, but for most of the important stuff in collaboration, we could do it now virtually, and Myro and Mural definitely are making a change. Yet, as I was discussing this with Martin, there's still a number of individuals, and I would say managers, decision makers, that still don't see the benefits of visual collaboration where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I can take share my
Sure.
take and then pass it on to you, Jim. Honestly, we were already kind of, a lot of teams were already distributed before COVID, right? So there was this trend towards distributed teams because of internet, video conferencing, whatever technology. Mira's been around for a decade. Like I was one of the first 1,000 users, like 10 years ago, 11 years ago. So this has been happening, and COVID sort of accelerated it, and maybe the few months kind of that it took for people to try a new way and then adopt it, like really accelerated the adoption um, of some of these ways of working. Um, but again, like once you start using sort of some of these collaboration tools, it's like going from a typewriter to a word processor, right? Like you kind of like then start using it, whether you're in person, you're virtual, wherever you are. Like it's just another way to think, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, to answer your question of like why, like there are certain people that haven't been able to adopt it or haven't adopted it as much, at least the way I see it, and I'm curious about your thoughts, Jim, is that the visual collaboration tools have made sort of doing the work pretty easy. Like it's really easy to come together, to do the work, to strategize, plan, do the work. But what I still feel like I need in-person time for is to resolve conflict, is to have like very hard discussions, or yeah, those are the things that are really hard still, I think, to somehow like do, plus have a coffee. And I think that's maybe like that's where we're seeing this drop off between sort of the executive level that is mostly thinking about conflict and
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
perhaps people who are doing the work.
Hmm.
Jim.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, similar thinking over here. We like to think about what we call the digitally defined workplace, not in terms of tools, but in terms of what are the core jobs that teams need to get done together as a group of people. And there's a couple of different categories of things, like communicate in real time, like we're doing right here. And then there's tools that support that. Communicate asynchronously, and there's tools that do that, Slack and such. But I think if you look at that constellation of functions that teams are trying to get done, there's this idea of communicating visually, right? That actually, tools like Zoom actually don't fulfill. So I see visual collaboration as not just adding another tool on or another type of collaboration. It actually fulfills a unique need in how we collaborate. And guess what? Here's the thing. Everybody collaborates visually. Sometimes when we talk about collaborating visually, people say, yeah, but I'm not a designer. And then I go into their office and their monitors are full of sticky notes and they got flip charts and whiteboards. Like anytime you do that in person or you did that in your office, guess what? That's visual collaboration. And it's really important. And here's the thing why it's important. I agree with Shipra. It helps you talk and think better. It literally, you're allowed to offload cognition to the visualization. That's why you do it. Because if you have a complex strategy, Shipra meant strategy, right? Let's put it out on a business model canvas. So let's represent that as boxes and arrows. That allows you to park that and think about something else. So you don't have to maintain that all in your head. So you literally offload thinking to something like a visual canvas, right? In addition to that, it also allows for more participation, that other people can participate in that conversation. So it actually subverts hierarchy to some degree too. And again, to the people who are like, hey, we got to get back in the office. I think that we need to rethink how we're managing and why we're actually pushing to go back in the office. And by the way, it's not just managers. I just yesterday read an article in the New York Times. The governor of New York City and the governor of New York and the mayor of New York City, they're basically saying everybody's got to come back. Of course, they're worried about real estate and commerce, but everybody's got to come back. It's like, I think we need to really rethink, the office in general, right? And are we post-pandemic? I used that term the other day, and somebody called me out on it. I actually think we're in an endemic now. So I'm going to say, yeah, maybe we're in a transition phase, but yeah, it's post-pandemic now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we Paul and I have raised this question, I think, on our last two broadcasts, and you know, there isn't a clear answer to it. Are we in the middle of it? Are we at the start of it? Are we at this? Are we at the kind of the end of the beginning of something radical?
I think we're transitioning out and starting something new. Yeah, it's in a gray period. Yeah.
But Shivra, you said something really interesting there, where you said it gives us another way to think. And Paul made a point at the very outset where he talked about let's call them an older generation who may have one way of using post-its, sticky notes, whiteboards, literal whiteboards with markers and stuff. From both your perspectives, are there particular obstacles or barriers that you encounter to people adopting into the new way of doing stuff, particularly that we've been accelerated into it? Shipper, you make the point that, you know, we've been doing this for 10 years. I'm sure, Jim, you're pretty much exactly the same.
Same thing,
but we found ourselves doing the 100-meter sprint instead of the marathon over the last 2 years. So are there particular obstacles that you've encountered to getting a foothold in that visual communication space?
Yeah, I mean, what has been interesting about COVID is that kind of forced move, right? And as humans, like, it obviously, like, you all know this, like, it's very hard to change our habits and behaviors unless there's like increase. It's not just about the energy you spend changing, like the value you're getting has to be like 10x or 100x for you to spend that energy changing, right? And that's, I think, the energy that COVID gave us was this ability to just like kickstart that change. I think once people are over the hump and to your gray area that we're kind of transitioning, I think we're going to see people realize that this is not a remote work tool, that this is just, you know, just like you adopted the PowerPoint 20 or 30 years ago or email 20 years ago. This is just another tool that is going to start becoming sort of a way of thinking. So, I mean, to your point, Martin, like, what is stopping people? I think it's just not having experienced it. And once you experience it, you can start, I think you see it, like, because for us, like, I know there's a lot of times when we were all in a room together, but we still kind of use Miro. And I believe a lot in physical drawing and physicality is so important, and creativity, but we still would use these tools on our computers in a room.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. The first thing that came to my mind to answer the question was a mindset, really, because if you can learn how to use Zoom and all the other teleconferencing tools, if you can learn how to use Slack, guess what? You can learn how to use Mural or Miro. I mean, it's the barrier to entry right there is not hard. I think the hard thing, though, but it's not a tool problem. It's not a tool problem. I think the mindset shift is, how do we do that visual collaboration in a digital way, whether it's in person or remote, right? And think about that. I think part of the issue for me actually comes from trying to improvise interaction. And this is where I think, you know, thinking about collaboration and collaboration design, how do you design the collaboration, I think is really important, because the way that I see it, what happened is, you know, a century ago or so, when knowledge workers started to become more prevalent, managers realized that if they put them together in the same office, people would collaborate together. So the office was actually a collaboration tool, right? But it was haphazard. It wasn't structured. It was basically just sit over there, walk over there, and cross your fingers and hope that work gets done. When we took the meeting at the office out of the equation, though, people had to start thinking about collaboration in a much more deliberate and intentional way. And if you open up a whiteboard and it's blank, you're going to be like, this isn't helping me. And I think what's needed is structure and organization and what we call guided methods. So I think to help with the mindset shift and the habit shift and human behavior shift is bring in guided methods. And that's where something like a visual canvas is super, super helpful, because I can get you from point A to point B in a meeting without having to improvise that. We're going to do a check-in, then we're going to do an exercise to get ideas out, then we're going to prioritize those, then we're going to go into our roadmap, then we're going to reflect. And I can visualize that for everybody in advance and structure that interaction. You might go off course, but you still have that structure of the interaction. So I think being more deliberate about collaboration and actually designing the collaboration experience helps with that mindset shift too.
I totally agree. And can I just add one thing onto what you're saying, Jim?
Yeah.
It's almost like we kind of learned how to use PowerPoint. You know, like, you know, a lot of pushback I get is, you know, meeting facilitation is hard, planning a meeting is hard. Who's going to spend the time planning it? But we do spend the time putting together a PowerPoint to present at a meeting. And if we just repurpose 10% of that time to plan a meeting, that could be, it could be incremental. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of that's an interesting take on it, isn't it? That it's providing that structured shape. And again, when you think back to the way that meetings have evolved and have developed by way of being structured, maybe these visual collaboration tools are just another extension of that. But I came across I was and still am a mind mapper. So I think visually really strongly in mind map type format, a bit like the neural network thing. And I've found over the years of facilitating groups, some people really adapt to that almost instantly, but some people equally can be just switched off. They look at it and they go, oh, that's just a blurb, I just don't get it. So do we encounter the same problem with the whiteboard concept in the visual collaboration space, where we meet half of the audience, they're not visual collaborators? And how do we overcome that particular obstacle if we've just got one conceptual tool?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when we think about designing collaboration and working visually too, I think you also have to think about how that degrades, so that if you don't have that collaboration, that visual, if you're not participating in the visualization, can you still participate? And I think you can. I think you can have both, in other words. And for me, it's kind of this multimodal group expression, right? So we can see each other, we can hear each other, we can chat with each other, and we can visualize. And if you're not the great visualizer, then you need another mode to be able to express yourself. Can you raise your hand? Is turn taking regulated? Can I express myself in the chat as well too? And it's really about having those different types of outlets. I think that are important. But this doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think, you know, we're talking about structuring a meeting, and people are like, oh no, I got to spend all this time. It's like, just do one thing. Just add one thing to your meeting and try that out, like a check-in. We're going to do a check-in so that we make sure everybody's here. Okay. And then do that for a week until, you know, a month until okay, we're going to do a check-in at every meeting. And that becomes a thing in your company. That's a habit. Okay. Now we're going to add decision-making exercises, right? And just add that. So, you know, we're not advocating like, okay, for everything, you know, forget about it. And you got to change everything. It can be incremental and habit by habit or ritual by ritual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's also plus everything Jim said. I'm not going to repeat it, but there are. I think it's really important to think about, as a facilitator, as somebody organizing the meeting, what problems you're trying to solve. And like, maybe some problems require a spreadsheet, and so like go to the spreadsheet. But I think the number, like I read a Stanford study that said 65% of people are visual thinkers. So like they remember artifacts that are visual versus verbal or textual. So you're right, there's a big chunk that may not be there. And when I'm facilitating groups, it doesn't require everyone to go all crazy and like, you know, like all the stickies and all the maths. Like, not, people feel lost. People need some amount of structure. So there is ways of facilitating, even with stickies and mind maps, where you provide structure, where you're like, everyone write 3 things. Self-filter, write 3 things, don't write 100. So there's ways to bring people along, and explain why, like the reason we're using these tools is to combine multiple concepts that wouldn't come together otherwise.
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about that 3 things, which is a technique I very often use. It works in 2 different directions. One is if you say just write 3 things. It's not a blank canvas and like, hey guys, we're going to fill this up, but everybody gets a spot and it's write your top 3 things down. It helps them prioritize and get over some of those hesitations, but also you're going to get 3 things because people feel obligated to fill those 3 things out. So it's a really good structured facility. It's a micro interaction facilitation technique that helps overcome some of these hesitations. And guess what? Everybody can type. It's not, you don't have to be thinking about the color of the sticky note or the position of the sticky note. Let's just write those 3 things down as well too. But we like to think about, there's facilitation, but there's also what we call collaboration design, and anybody can be a collaboration designer. So there are professional facilitators, and you can get certified in facilitation, and somebody can facilitate the meeting. But we think the collaboration design is a skill that actually a lot of other people can have as well too. Even if you're just leading a meeting, you can be. We can think of you as a collaboration designer, and bringing in rituals and intentionality into the group interaction is important at all different levels.
So by collaboration design, do you mean designing collaboration?
Yeah.
Or collaborating in design processes?
I mean designing collaboration. It's a little of both, but it's mostly designing collaboration. And here's the thing: in addition to problem solving, right? Because we're collaborating together because we have a common challenge, right? That's what draws us together, 2 or more people. And there are methods and techniques to problem solve. Design thinking gets you from point A to point B. Agile rituals get you from point A to point B. I think there's a whole nother layer there that we were missing during the pandemic, which was connecting as a team. Right. So when we talk about collaboration design, we're talking about the experience of coming together to solve a problem, but also coming together and connecting at the same time. And those 2 things weave in and out of each other. They feed off of each other. But there are explicit methods and techniques that you can use to help the team connect as well too. And a collaboration designer would be looking at that, as well as, do we even need to meet? So maybe we can do this asynchronously as well too, right? That's part of collaboration design.
And I'm just mindful, Paul, that architecting collaboration is.
Yeah, I saw that, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, that's and Paul and I have talked about that a little bit in the past, haven't we? That
it's absolutely, it's amazing because we are facing an issue on LinkedIn, but we are attracting so many viewers that suddenly we have now lots of people on YouTube and on Twitter, and I have our stream team with us trying to fix the problem on LinkedIn. But I hope this will be sooner rather than later also on LinkedIn. It's really great that the conversation is taking such a deeper sense here in terms of architecting collaboration as a discipline, right? And in a certain way, for certain managers, especially in public administration, I see that there's a challenge in getting this kind of participative management. We've seen, any high-tech company these days cannot survive without taking a collaborative decision-making process for anything that they want to do. But for public servants, for public services, do you have any war stories of your products being used by public administration? Jim and Chipra?
Go ahead, Chipra.
I can start just with a couple of stories. I worked with, I live in San Francisco. I worked with the state of California on a project, and it was, they were trying to build a tool to automate some services, and we did a design sprint with them, and they had never it was just so out of their realm of what they did, but somehow this person convinced them to do a design sprint, so we did one. And what came out of even the first day was these executives who are experts were sort of these low-level workers who were out in the field coming in and sharing the stories and sharing their artifacts. And these executives who had been running this whole program saying, we have never heard that. We've done this for 20 years. We've never, actually, we didn't know that's what was happening on the ground. So just, I think for me, that moment showed me how, of course, how far Silicon Valley was from government. But again, at Miro, I'm constantly talking to our government customers, and they're really like wanting to up level and upskill. And I think government is getting to where industry is. I see the same conversations, the same vocabulary, at least in my realm, Jim.
Yeah. No, we're seeing the same thing and the same enthusiasm as well too. And there is, dealing with companies in Silicon Valley. I work closely with Intuit, which is often, put up as a very customer-centric, innovative company, and they kind of get it. Design thinking, they're going to get all of this kind of right away, and then you will work with somebody in the public sector and it's new to them, which for me, I've been in human-centered design and UX for over 2 decades now. It's like, oh yeah, there still are people for whom a design sprint is something new, and there's this attraction to it there, which is good as well too. But then there's also this kind of leapfrogging effect, which is interesting, because the conversation isn't how do we do a design sprint remote, which was a big question we had before the pandemic. It's just that's what you teach: design sprints and remote collaboration or digital collaboration. You're just teaching them at the same time, and this is how we do it. We do it in a virtual canvas with Zoom or not. We're in person, but we still do it on a virtual canvas. So you're able to actually combine the things and not separate them. Because one of the questions that we used to have, like I said, was how do you do a design sprint remotely? And okay, let's figure out design sprints, and then let's figure out how to do that digitally. With particularly with public sector stuff, we're just teaching them both at the same time. So there's no like separation of those two things. It's just how you do it, moving forward. So there's this almost this leapfrogging effect, because sometimes they get to a point that's harder to get to for companies that had done those things before the pandemic, for instance.
So do you see a big difference between public sector and private sector organizations in this collaborative space, or let's say collaborative disposition? Is there a stark contrast? Chipper, you made the point that the gap may be closing, but is there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a difference, because we also have to look at motivations of the organization, because that affects collaboration, right? And in commercial spaces, the motivation is to serve customers and also to be profitable, to serve customers in a profitable way. Whereas in public sectors, there's a different motivation that is giving them challenges. It's to serve very often citizens. And we care about the citizen experience, but there's also things like regulations that come into play as well too. So that does affect then why teams are collaborating and the passion that they bring to the table and their motivations, which do affect collaboration. But that might be a little bit under the hood, so to speak, or under the bonnet, as you say over there in the UK. But I think in general, though, there are probably more similarities than not between the public sector and commercial sectors, for instance, in how they collaborate digitally.
Yeah. Chipra, would you have seen big differences or more similarities?
Honestly, not in my experience. And I will definitely accept that I'm not a public sector expert. I think there are large Fortune 500 companies that would have been just as surprised as the folks I worked with in the government of California at actually seeing what the leaf nodes of the organization experience every day. So I don't know that I can speak to that with any level of expertise.
Because that puts me in mind that some of the work that I do is around conflict resolution. And one of the points that perpetually comes up about conflict resolution is that before we're anything else, we're basically people. And basic people motivations and expectations and requirements, in my experience, they trump everything else. They come first and foremost, no matter what your background, professional, organization. When we get down to the brass tacks, and I'm just wondering, does your point there, Shipra, does it actually emphasize that idea that at the raw people level, public sector, private sector, Fortune 500, or the mom and pop store down at the corner, doesn't really matter. If we're looking to collaborate, we have to appeal to the people's expectations and requirements before we appeal to anything else. Would that be a fair fair comment or observation?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think at the core, people want to be proud of their work and build, nice things and do it with folks around them. And
Yeah.
I feel like we're providing the tools for them to do it. Tools, not so much in the sense of the software, but tools with methods or whatever you may call it. We're providing the tools for them to use um, to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that, innovation in the broadest sense of the term, whether it's a small change or a big change, we can call that innovation. And whether it's a change to a commercial product or a government policy, there's innovation there. At the core of it, people have been trying to processize innovation. Like, what's the secret sauce to innovation? Turns out the secret sauce to innovation is people and collaboration, right?
Yeah.
More and more so, actually, these days. And if getting the people inside of your organization connected as human beings, that's that connection layer that I was talking about. Yeah, can we solve the problem together? But are we connected? Will actually, we believe, help your innovation efforts. And I think, just thinking back on the previous question too, one perhaps difference between commercial organizations and public sector too is on the commercial side, we start seeing more and more talk about the employee experience. That in order to have a great customer experience, you have to have a great employee experience. And I think that's where collaboration, it makes a huge difference, because guess what? I'm interacting with my colleagues most of the day, and my experience as an employee is working with the people that I work with. And I'm not sure in the public sector if I actually don't know myself how far employee experience has gotten into the public sector. I suspect it will, and once it does, then people and collaboration is going to be critical on that side as well.
Absolutely. Now time's flying. I think we are 15 minutes to call this great conversation off. I always like to put myself on the shoes of the manager who wants to accomplish and extracts more from the team. And now we are seeing that this face-to-face gatherings coming back, and people now are back on the room and they still using their post-it notes. Are you seeing, Jim and Shipra, after the pandemic, there's more usage of your platforms even in face-to-face meetings?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're like Jim said, like it's a gray. People are transitioning, people are figuring things out. What I am starting to see is that folks understand that there is this continuity to doing things digitally, right? So you can prep ahead of time, you can have things later. If somebody like gets COVID and has to quarantine, they can still participate. Like there's values to having digital be part of your toolkit when you're coming together in person. And people are starting to see like, oh my God, the terrible handwriting or the sticky notes that keep falling, or having to book the same room 5 days in a row. Like people are starting to, I think, navigate some of that. And what I'm seeing is digital is a big part of physical gatherings, especially when it's for creative innovation, problem solving. And I think the other thing people are starting to do, or that I'm starting to hear from our customers, is this very like kind of critically thinking about what you want to get accomplished when you're together, and what you can get accomplished when you're apart. And maybe when you're together, you focus on some of those. Maybe just like talking about gardening or like talking about like those things that you want to do, like that you may not get to. Like you might get to a little bit, but those deep conversations or building relationships, building trust, resolving conflict, perhaps, and then kind of being more intentional about using, remote or distributed time for perhaps some other things like getting work done.
Yeah, I think there has to be an intentional flexibility there, and we like to look at kind of the future of different modes of working along two axes. One is in-person versus remote, so it's a matrix, and then the other is synchronous and asynchronous. That gives you 4 different quadrants. And the thing about that is any one person particularly if you're working on multiple teams, but even if you're just working on one team, you're going to move in and out of those different quadrants on a daily basis. I might be working asynchronously remote in the morning and then go to the office, and then I'm working synchronously and in person, and then in the afternoon I'm at home on a call and I'm working remote synchronously, right? The only way to do that, the only way to tie that together is if all of your work is digital. And guess what? The next day is going to be different, right? You have to be able to open up your laptop and just continue. So for the sake of momentum, there has to be this fluidity that I think only digital technology is gonna use. A sticky note is a great place to get an idea out, right? Because there's no user manual. Pick up the sticky note, write on it. No user manual there. It's a really bad place to manage that information from that point afterwards. Right. And I think that's what we have to be thinking about. Not just can we blurt out information, but how do we keep the information in a fluid way that keeps the conversation going on? It's really about momentum that I think that is key through hybrid situations, through different modes of collaborating.
I'm just noticing here on our chat line, guys, we've got one question that's just come up, I think, for both of you actually, and it's coming from Peter Beck. And Peter's just asking about the templates that both of your products use. And he's just wondering about do people does it help people using the templates to actually adapt to the technology, and do people, at least when they're starting, depend more on the templates to get started, or what's the experience with the template use? Thanks for that.
I mean, we've always been using templates, even pre-Miro and Mural. You learn frameworks, you learn ways of thinking, you learn ways of organizing information. So I think in the digital world, yes, templates are useful. They provide sort of a place to start. And of course, we do see people starting with templates, whether they're beginners or experts. Beginners or experts at Miro, beginners or experts at facilitation. You start with a template and kind of modify it to your needs. That's perhaps what I can say to that, Jim.
Yeah, I definitely think it helps, and that goes back to the point that I made earlier about structuring your meetings and your collaboration, because otherwise it's just improvised and a little bit haphazard. And a template, a template is the artifact, but it's really the method that a template embodies. And as Shipra was talking about, we had templates offline in different forms, and in fact, recently, Miro announced the acquisition of Luma. If you don't know the company Luma, they basically have a system of templatized design thinking methods. You can get those in Mural as well too, but we had those templates to get you from point A to point B in other forms before the digital technology. And I think it's really about thinking about how are you going to be deliberate and how are you going to design your collaboration, and templates really, really help you to do that. And they do that spatially and visually. The thing that I love about a template, it's even better than an in-person meeting, because I can communicate the before, during, and after of our collaboration in one overview. And I have people come in and go, oh, that's where we're going to end today, right? It's harder to do that actually in person than it is now. I just gave my first in-person workshop in 2.5 years, and I was like, they don't know where I'm going because I'm going slide by slide. If I were doing this remote, I'd be able to show them the end. And it's the template that gives you that peripheral vision, and I think that helps in collaboration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I will add, actually, Jim, like what you said is so true, and I almost feel like with templates on digital whiteboards, that some of these methods have become more democratized, right? They were very elite before you went to graduate school and you paid thousands of dollars for this training. And now they're out there. I mean, of course, you still need to see perhaps examples or use them a couple of times to be able to get value from them. But I really love how it's super democratized, that anyone can come in and learn these methods.
I would agree, and I would say it helps democratize innovation as well too across your organization. Yes. I mean, it just ladders up to that level, and that's what we've been seeing.
I think you made an interesting point about templates, and it's the idea that they provide a starting point, they provide a beginning, but that you don't have to slavishly follow them, that you still have to work with the group dynamic, You still have to go a little bit in the direction that the group is going in order to get the maximum collaboration out of whatever group, whether it's online or in person or otherwise. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, you have to have a plan. I always have a plan. I know what I'm going to do every 10 minutes. You have to have a plan, and that gives you the confidence to be able to not follow the plan when you need to move away.
Right. Yeah. You have a plan so that you can change the plan. But let's look at the alternative. Bellying up to a blank canvas. You don't want to go to a blank canvas with a group of people and say, "Okay, let's get going," because then you're improvising the rules of engagement while you're improvising the content at the same time. You don't want to be doing both of those. That's like free jazz, and I don't know if you guys like free jazz at all, but free jazz is really difficult to listen to. We want to have the sheet music in front of us, and even if we improvise off of it, it's there, right? And you can always fall back to it, as Shipra was saying, right?
Absolutely. I'm glad to see that Mike Clargo and Peter Beck are on YouTube because they were struggling on LinkedIn to watch us. So I'm glad that finally our audience is reaching us. And thank you so much for your comments. I also love this idea of continuity that Mike brought here, in the sense of creating the virtual situation room where you can have a project that lasts for more than 2 or 3 weeks. And with these online platforms you beautifully produce, teams and organizations can have not only one but multiple situation rooms, saving a lots of through real estate, because if you have to have these project rooms in physical buildings, that will be so expensive. And this is another way of looking at the added value of collaboration. Do you think you're charging fair for your platforms? Because in the end, people pay a few dozens of dollars to use your platforms per month, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the physical situation rooms is that they're often not funded. So what you end up having is people have to share a room, and that's where the do not erase on the whiteboard comes from, right? We've all done do not erase. And I have a great story from a customer of ours that did a 2-day workshop, and between day 1 and day 2, they wrote "do not erase," and the cleaning crew came in and erased everything except for the words "do not erase," right on it, right? So, if it's important work and we're flying around the world to have design sprint and stuff like that, you don't want the cleaning your important information in danger of being erased by the cleaning crew, right? So yeah, it's about momentum. Right, so a visual collaboration tool provides the structure and the visualization of where you're going and where you're ending, and it can be a proxy for that physical situation room. That is super, super valuable. So should we be charging more? Maybe.
I will let you guys make the case for like that's not. I don't dabble in revenue. But I think what's also like to the point of continuity, what we've seen and what I've heard from many an executive now, having been at Miro for about a year, having all these conversations, is this marked move from these big 1-week sprints, 1-day offsite, to multiple smaller, more frequent but smaller meetings with work continuing in between. And whiteboards, I don't even know if these things should be called whiteboards, but whiteboards are not tied to a room anymore. They're tied to teams, they're tied to projects. And it's the idea of having the space to come back to, even if as a developer you're not writing software in Miro, you're like going to your SDE, but you can come back and talk about it. And Miro designers might be in their design tools, but it's just this, it's becoming this space that just follows the team around, which you wouldn't be able to do even with the war rooms. Like they would come together for a few weeks and break apart. But this can live for quarters.
Yeah, that was a point, Jim, that you made a little earlier in the conversation, that this idea of once it's written, it's actually preserved, whereas the sticky note, that's nothing except a sticky note. And
it's going to fall off anyway, as Shipra mentioned, right? The virtual sticky notes don't fall on the floor.
Yeah.
But I agree, this notion of space is really important because research into collaboration has actually shown that it's the conditions of collaboration and the environment that actually has the biggest impact on how well teams collaborate. And now we're talking about space in a digital way. And I think that's super important. And the quality and the nature of the spaces in which teams are collaborating affects the quality and the nature of the outputs that they generate together. Right. And we're looking here at Mural. We actually have we're doing some work in VR, and VR is another space for collaboration. It's visual and it's immersive, right? So we're really trying to think about, digital canvas. People might be in person. How do you do that digitally? But what about VR and future spaces as well too? So this idea of the collaboration space becomes a core concern of collaboration design.
Absolutely. I've been reading a lot about metaverse recently. Even McKinsey published something about it very recently. And I think that could be the last comment, Martin, unless you say anything as we are going to finish. How do you see the metaverse building on top of your tools? Are we going to see like avatars collaborating instead of persons? And
I mean, listen, the bandwidth of communication digitally has been increasing, right? Like, went from words to audio to video to like visual to, like, this bandwidth is going to keep increasing. And I don't, I can't predict. Like, it does seem like VR and like this some sort of metaverse like interactions are going to be the future, and like it's just becoming easier to create more bandwidth, right? Like more ways, like, perhaps we can like smell each other in the future. Who knows? Like, to
Smell-o-vision, yeah.
Right, smell creates connection. There is research showing that, like, being together in a room, the pheromones help. So maybe we'll get there, right? So like there is going to be increasing bandwidth. I think at that, and we, like, both our companies will have to build towards it. And for sure at Miro, we're thinking about it all the time. But essentially, the goal is still to get people together and create shared artifacts and take what's in their head out and be able to, like, it's amplify, like, to amplify the power of many in one space. So I think there's going to be things in the future, and we're learning.
Absolutely, Shipra. I cannot concur more, because whenever I see myself on a metaverse space to collaborate with others, the first thing I'll do, where is my online whiteboard?
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Needing that anyway.
Yeah, I don't think we quite know. I think there's a there, and I agree that it's heading in that direction, and bandwidth is increasing. And I don't mean physical bandwidth; I mean just digital bandwidth, and we will be there in these more immersive experiences. I don't think we quite know what that means for workplace collaboration. One thing I know is what not to do, and that's to just replicate what we did offline, right? Because that's so far what we're seeing is like they literally like draw an office and here's a whiteboard. And I think what we have to do is go back and rethink collaboration and rethink methods so that they make sense in something like the metaverse. And the one thing that we've already found is really, really good in the metaverse is around that disconnection or connecting people. And our colleague Eric Flowers was actually quoted in an article around playing golf. And it sounds like really weird, but playing a round of golf with your team or on a one-on-one in the metaverse is actually a great way to do team building, because it's a sport that doesn't have time involved, that you can actually take a pause and talk to each other, or while one person is putting, the other person talks. So there's this real connection effect of being immersive. So one thing I think that we already have evidence of is that the human connection can actually be amplified through the metaverse. I'm not quite sure how we do all the other problem solving and where the digital, we got to figure that out. I think we will, but that's kind of the exciting journey that we're all on together.
Definitely. And I see here a comment by Peter Beck on the goggles that are hurting because you wear them for so long. That's also another issue we have to fix. Thank you, Peter, for your comments. Thank you, Miguel Cañas, and thank you all friends and colleagues for being so participating here on the comments and watching us. It's really great. I mean, for you, Jim and Chipra, we're having the record audience ever, and this is without LinkedIn, firing up the transmission. So it's incredible. Of course, for our all LinkedIn users, what we're going to do, we're going to record this session. It's being recorded. We're going to do another broadcast in a week time for you guys having the chance to watch us again. I apologize for the lack of connections. Martin, over to you. Conclusions and final round. We have to finish.
Yeah, well, I suppose we started talking about COVID, but COVID wasn't the start. COVID was the accelerant. That was the expression that was used, that it pushed things along much faster than it might otherwise have happened. And we're in need of a new way of thinking, so that the visual collaboration space is demanding a new way of thinking. But it doesn't necessarily mean that people who are not visual collaborators can't join the party. So the possibilities that the visual tools give us allow us to collaborate in multiple different ways. The whole concept of the guided methods, the templates, they provide us not only with a starting point, it is a step-off point, but it provides us with this way to interconnect with many more different people who are expecting many more different ways of collaboration. Collaboration design, Jim, that was a point that you made, and it's the idea that we need to engage people in designing our methods of collaboration. So it's not just about the tools, it's not just about Mural or Miro, it's more about the overall process of engagement and collaboration, and then we fit the tools into that process. And that process then can happen synchronously or asynchronously, in person or remotely. Which again, Jim, going back to the grid concept that you mentioned earlier, provides a nice kind of visual way to think about that process and how we might use it. Shipra, I'll finish with an idea that I hadn't heard expressed before the way that you expressed it, but I think it's a really interesting idea. And it's the bandwidth of communication and collaboration. That's been building from the Stone Age. That's been building from when we all crawled out of the ocean. And it's going to continue building. That was the key point, Shipra, that I took from what you said. And that these types of tools and the concept of visual collaboration, it's just another step in expanding our collaborative bandwidth.
Absolutely. I mean, we could not have a better way to end this conversation with this wonderful conclusion. And Jim and Shipra, over to you. Last thought on sharing for the manager or the decision maker that is watching us and still undecided about whether taking a digital visual collaboration approach in our teams. Final word.
Okay, my final word would be try one thing. Just in your next meeting with your team, try one thing. I propose the love bomb icebreaker in Miroverse, which is my template. So I'm kind of self-plugging, but every time I've tried it, I walk away with tears and warm fuzzies. But try one thing. If that's not your style, try something else. Try one thing.
Amazing. Thank you.
I gotta agree with that as well too. So I'm gonna +1 that. Don't think you have to boil the ocean. But the things that you do try, the rituals that you do try, I want to urge people to think about them along 2 different dimensions. And one is solving the problem or the challenge that the team has and why you're collaborating, but also connecting people to really get at that disconnection. Because one thing that we found during the pandemic in our own research, and you see stories about it out there, is that people feel disconnected. They feel disconnected from each other, from their teams. Teams are disconnected with other teams, and even company to company is disconnection. So yeah, you got to solve the problem, and methods like design thinking or even a design sprint get you from point A to point B. But the team also goes through a cycle, a journey as well too, connecting and reflecting and building psychological safety, learning together and accomplishing. How do you celebrate your accomplishments together? So think about that. As you brought up, Martin, there's a human factor as well too in there.
Yeah, that's where it all starts and ends, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Otherwise, we'll be taking too long on broadcast. It was so great to have you here, Jim, Chipra, and Martin. Thanks a lot for this summary. I think everybody's saying thanks, and what a wonderful conversation. I also thank you for watching us and taking your precious time to watch this conversation, which I hope will be here to stay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Nice seeing you again, Shipra. Bye, Martin.
So
Bye,
fun
Paul.
to talk to you, Jim.
Likewise. Cheers, everybody.
See you guys.
Bye. Bye-bye.